They've always said we were the victors of evolution, the species that endured while all others faded into extinction. But what if that's not the whole story? What if Homo sapiens didn't just survive, but conquered? What if we didn't coexist with the Neanderthals but systematically erased them from the earth? This isn't some forgotten chapter of history, it's a prehistoric murder mystery, 40,000 years in the making. A tale not of progress, but of violence, strategy, and silence. The clues aren't written in books or carved in stone, they're buried in shattered skulls, broken bones, and the sudden absence of a people who once ruled Europe. This is not just about who we were. It's about what we did to become who we are, and it's time we unearth the truth. We've all heard the version taught in classrooms. Homo sapiens and Neanderthals once shared the vast, icy landscapes of prehistoric Europe. They hunted mammoths, gathered berries, made tools, and 7 interbred. Then, over time, the Neanderthals vanished. Textbooks say it was nature at work, evolution favoring the more adaptable species. Some blame the shifting climate, others point to disease, dwindling resources, or sheer bad luck. But what if that's only part of the story? What if the real reason they disappeared wasn't natural selection, but targeted elimination? Beneath the clean narrative lies a theory few dare to voice aloud. A theory that suggests Homo sapiens didn't merely outlast the Neanderthals, we destroyed them. Silently, strategically, and without remorse. Not evolution, extermination. And the deeper we dig into bones, genomes, and ancient battlegrounds, the harder it becomes to look away from this darker truth. If you want to know how a species died, start with the bones, and the bones of Neanderthals don't lie. Archaeologists have uncovered shocking evidence of trauma-blunt force injuries, shattered skulls, and puncture wounds that match primitive weapons. These aren't the marks of wild animals or hunting accidents. They're the brutal signatures of violence, deliberate, targeted, and human. Take the Shanidar cave skeleton in Iraq. One Neanderthal's rib bears a wound consistent with a Stabinga calculated thrust, not a chance injury. Or El Sidron in Spain, where Neanderthal bones were butchered like livestock and, worse, show signs of cannibalism, not from desperation during famine, but from something colder, ritualistic. Perhaps even a message. This wasn't survival, it was slaughter. And if this violence was systemic, repeated across regions and generations, then maybe what we're looking at isn't coexistence at all, but conquest. Neanderthals were no weaklings. They were muscular, rugged, and built for survival in brutal Ice Age conditions. Their bodies could endure freezing nights and wrestle wild prey. But strength wasn't everything. Homo sapiens had a different kind of power strategy. We could plan beyond the moment, coordinate across vast distances, and communicate with complexity. And when those abilities were weaponized, the results were devastating. This wasn't a battle, it was a systematic erasure. Hit-and-run raids on camps, strategic ambushes under cover of darkness. Signs point to entire Neanderthal families vanishing without a trace. And the pattern is chillingly consistent. In region after region, the timeline is the same. Homo sapiens arrive. And soon after, Neanderthals are gone. Not over millennia, but in centuries or less. This wasn't nature gently selecting the fittest. It was a silent, calculated purge. A prehistoric Warone we won not by chance, but by design. In the cold, unforgiving landscapes of Ice Age Europe, fire was more than warmth, it was a claim, and the story it tells is unsettling. In layers of ancient ash, archaeologists have found a stark shift. Hearths once belonging to Neanderthals suddenly exhibit new structures, new patterns, and unfamiliar remnants of meals. These aren't signs of cultural exchange, they're signs of replacement. Overlapping layers suggest that Homo sapiens didn't just arrive, they took over. Not gradually, but with suddenness that hints at conflict. Territory was survival. Control the caves, and you control shelter. Control the rivers, and you control life. These weren't just natural resources, they were power. And in this zero-sum world, coexistence was rarely an option. When one fire was lit, another was extinguished. The flames of Homo sapiens didn't merge with those of the Neanderthals, they consumed them. Fire became a symbol not of sharing, but of conquest. Yes, it's true modern Eurasians carry traces of Neanderthal DNA, roughly 1 to 2%. But to interpret this as evidence of peaceful coexistence is misleading. History teaches us a darker pattern. The victors don't always erase the defeated, they often absorb them. Through force, coercion, or dominance, genetic legacy can persist even when cultures vanish. The presence of Neanderthal DNA doesn't speak of love and harmony, it may speak of asymmetrical power, of unions forged not through choice, but through conquest. Just as empires throughout history have left their mark in bloodlines, so too might Homo sapiens have left theirs in Neanderthal genomes. These genetic echoes are not necessarily signs of collaboration, they may be the scars of prehistoric subjugation. So when we uncover fragments of Neanderthal code in ourselves, we must ask, are we descendants of unity or inheritors of a war written in flesh? Across scattered excavation sites, archaeologists have uncovered the faint traces of hybrid children offspring born of both Neanderthals and Homo sapiens. On the surface, they suggest contact, even intimacy. But the truth beneath is far more unsettling. These children often appear as cultural or biological anomalies, neither fully accepted by one world nor the other. Their burials are unusual, even troubling. Bodies laid without ceremony, grave goods absent, sometimes discarded in shallow, isolated pits, as if their very existence was uncomfortable, perhaps even shameful. In prehistoric societies defined by tribe, kinship, and survival, identity was everything, and these hybrid children may have represented something unspoken, not union, but conquest. Were they seen as bridges between two species or living reminders of defeat, dominance, and blurred bloodlines? In their silent graves, we may find not celebration of connection, but evidence of rejection and the cost of being born between worlds. Neanderthals weren't the mindless brutes of old textbooks. They crafted tools with precision, buried their dead with care, and may have even created symbolic art markings on cave walls that suggest ritual and meaning. But after their disappearance, these cultural expressions vanish too. What was once attributed to Neanderthal hands is now often reattributed or outright replaced by Homo sapiens. Their tools gave way to new designs. Their customs faded without continuity. Their art, if it survived at all, was overwritten by the dominant species. This is more than loss. It's suppression. Just as conquering civilizations throughout history have erased the languages, symbols, and stories of those they displaced, Homo sapiens may have done the same deliberately or not. The silence that followed Neanderthals wasn't just genetic or physical, it was cultural. Their voice was drowned out, their narrative buried. Not just extinction, but erasure. Not all scholars accept the theory of Neanderthal genocide. Many point to alternative explanations, gradual assimilation, environmental pressures, or a lack of adaptive innovation. They argue that Neanderthals were simply outmatched by the changing climate or the cognitive edge of Homo sapiens. But even these more tempered theories must contend with an undeniable pattern. Wherever Homo sapiens appeared, Neanderthals disappeared, and not over vast epochs, but often within just a few centuries. The overlap is strikingly short, too short perhaps to be written off as coincidence. Time and again, the same sequence unfolds: arrival, encroachment, extinction. When a pattern repeats with such precision, it forces us to reconsider the story we've told. Are we witnessing a slow fade into oblivion, or the remnants of a targeted displacement? The debate continues, but the timeline casts a long, unsettling shadow, and sometimes the absence of evidence is itself the loudest testimony. History may not repeat itself, but it often rhymes sand, its echoes are chillingly familiar. From the forced removal of Native American tribes to the decimation of Aboriginal cultures in Australia, time and again we see the same grim pattern: dominant arrivals displacing indigenous peoples. The tools vary: bullets, disease, starvation, forced assimilation, but the outcome is hauntingly consistent: the erasure of one world by another, cultures silenced, languages lost, identities dismantled. And while these atrocities are documented, dissected, and mourned, what if their origins stretch back further than we imagined? What if the Neanderthal extinction wasn't an isolated prehistoric event, but the prologue to a recurring human behavior, a template for conquest written in the bones of our closest relatives? If so, the Neanderthal story isn't ancient history, it's a mirror, one that reflects our enduring tendency to eliminate the other in the pursuit of dominance. Neanderthals likely had language, maybe not with the nuance of modern syntax, but they communicated through sounds, gestures, meaning. They shared warnings, comforted their young, perhaps even told stories around firelight. But today, there is nothing. No surviving words, no songs. No oral traditions passed down through generations, just silence, total and final. We remember ancient Egyptians, Sumerians, even Ice Age Homo sapiens through their marks and myths. But for Neanderthals, not a single name endures. Their entire world view, how they saw the sky, the earth, each other, has vanished without a whisper. This is the deepest form of erasure. To kill a body is one act, but to wipe out memory, identity, voice, that is to extinguish a people entirely. The absence of Neanderthal language isn't just a gap in our history, it is a haunting reminder of how complete cultural annihilation can be, and how silence can be the loudest legacy of all. For generations, we've celebrated the rise of Homo sapiens as a triumph of intelligence and adaptability. We've cast ourselves as evolution's chosen creative, clever, resilient, the species that outlasted all others through brilliance alone. But what if that story is only half true? What if the legacy we wear so proudly is built not just on ingenuity, but on something far darker: ruthlessness? We didn't merely outthink the Neanderthals. We may have overwhelmed them, displaced them, extinguished them, not by fate or natural law, but by force, competition, and the cold logic of survival. Our ascent may have come at the cost of another world, a world buried beneath ours in silence, bone, and ash. To rewrite the narrative isn't to reject our past, but to confront it honestly. Because true understanding doesn't come from glorifying success, it comes from asking what that success required, and who had to vanish for us to stand where we are. This story may be ancient, but its echoes are unmistakably modern. The past isn't buried, it lives within us, in our instincts, in the way we fear those who are different, in our impulse to conquer, to claim, to reshape the narrative so we emerge as the hero. The extinction of the Neanderthals isn't just a chapter of prehistory, it's a mirror, one that reflects uncomfortable truths about human nature. Our drive to survive has always been paired with a capacity to dominate, to rewrite history with ourselves at the center, even if that means erasing others from the record. This isn't just about bones in a cave, it's about us, about how we treat those we consider less than, about what we're willing to forget to preserve the illusion of moral superiority. The story of the Neanderthals matters because it asks a simple but profound question. In becoming who we are, what did we lose? And more importantly, what might we still be capable of? In recent years, advances in archaeology and genetics have brought new revelations to light: more hybrid skeletons, more evidence of contact between Homo sapiens and Neanderthals. These discoveries paint a picture of interaction, even intimacy, but they don't rewrite the outcome. Instead, they sharpen it. For every hybrid child unearthed, for every shared cave or overlapping tool, one truth remains: The Neanderthal world was collapsing rapidly. Each new Homo sapiens encampment discovered marks not just presence, but pressure pushing the Neanderthals farther into the margins. From the heart of Europe to its fringes, their territory receded. Their options vanished. And eventually, so did they. These discoveries don't tell a story of peaceful coexistence. They tell a story of retreat, of a people being squeezed from every side until there was nothing left. No land, no refuge, no future. The more we uncover, the clearer it becomes. This wasn't just a disappearance, it was a closing trap. At the southern tip of Europe, in the shadowed caves of Gibraltar, a final ember may have flickered. Some researchers believe this is where the last Neanderthals made their stand isolated from the advancing tide of Homo sapiens, clinging to survival for thousands of years after their kin had vanished elsewhere. These limestone refuges weren't homes of peace, but strongholds on the edge of extinction. Trapped between an encroaching species and the unyielding sea, they lived in dwindling numbers, their world reduced to a few dark chambers and fading rituals. Was this the last Neanderthal community, a resilient holdout, defiant to the end? Or was it something more tragic, a prison of extinction, where the final members of an entire species waited for the inevitable in silence? Either way, Gibraltar's caves may not simply be archaeological sites. They may be tombs echoing with the memory of a people not lost to time, but cornered by it. For decades, we've softened the language. We've called it extinction as if Neanderthals simply faded away. We've framed it as evolution as if their end was inevitable, a passive chapter in a natural story. But what if the truth is harsher? What if this wasn't disappearance, but deliberate erasure? The archaeological record suggests more than coincidence. It hints at conflict, displacement, even massacre. If the arrival of Homo sapiens consistently preceded Neanderthal collapse, and if the evidence of violence, territory seizure, and cultural suppression continues to mount, then perhaps we must confront an unsettling possibility. This wasn't nature selecting the fittest. It may have been a prehistoric genocide, not with modern weapons, but with spears, fire, strategy, and silence. A calculated elimination of a competing human species. And if so, the perpetrators weren't unknown forces. They were us, our ancestors, the victors who buried the story along with the bones. Fossils are silent. They don't speak of betrayal or sorrow. They carry no words, no confessions. They lie in the soil, mute witnesses to a past we can only guess at. But if they could speak, if the shattered skulls and fractured ribs of Neanderthals could tell their story, what would they reveal? Would they echo tales of peaceful coexistence, or whisper of ambushes, displacements, and slow, methodical erasure? Would they describe Homo sapiens not as evolutionary victors, but as executioners, those who came not to share the world, but to claim it? These bones cannot accuse, but they endure. They resist forgetting. And in their stillness lies a haunting possibility, that the story we've told for so long as the noble, chosen survivors may be missing a truth too difficult to face. That we survived not because we were destined to, but because someone else didn't get the chance. And that the silence of bones is not peace, but the cost of conquest. Every ancient skull we unearth is more than a remnant of the past. It's a mirror held up to the present. It doesn't merely reveal what we were, but reflects what we're still capable of becoming. These bonescent, fragmented, buried for millennia carry a warning. They tell us that Homo sapiens may have once erased their closest relatives, not through accident, but intent. And if we could do that once, in an age without nations or ideologies, what might we do now with far greater tools, stronger divisions, and more to lose? The story of the Neanderthals is not just a prehistoric tragedy, it's a moral reckoning. It reminds us that the capacity for exclusion, domination, and erasure runs deep in our species. That beneath the veneer of civilization, the old instincts linger. The question isn't just how we survived, but at what cost, and whether we've truly evolved beyond that ancient impulse, or simply buried it, waiting for the next opportunity to rise again. This story isn't over, because the past never truly ends. It lingers in our research, our discoveries, our decisions. We're still writing the final chapters every time we excavate a cave, sequence ancient DNA, or challenge the comforting myths we've long believed. The fate of the Neanderthals isn't just a historical footnote, it's a reflection of our origins and a window into the shadows of our nature. In labs and lecture halls, in dusty excavation sites and digital archives, we continue to shape the narrative. And with every choice, we decide what truths we're willing to face and which ones we'd rather leave buried. The Neanderthals are gone. Erased not just from the earth, but from memory, from story, from language. Yet their silence speaks volumes. Because perhaps their story of survival, of erasure, of what it means to be humanus, the most human story of all. If this truth unsettled you, good. It means you're listening. There is more to uncover, more questions, more shadows, more uncomfortable truths waiting to be brought to light. Subscribe to Prehistoric Shadows for deeper explorations into the mysteries they tried to bury. Hit the bell icon so you never miss the next untold chapter, because the past isn't finished with us. And some bones still whisper, "Will you listen?"